Miningweb Weekly, where Peter Major gets to share his wisdom with the rest of us. He's also going to be sharing that same wisdom at the Biz News Conference next week. He's part of the Investment Masterclass, and Pete will obviously be helping the world who come to Hermanus at that time, or certainly our tribe come to Hermanus at that time to understand better what this crazy world that we live in is going to be offering up as opportunities for those who look at the resources sector. Okay, so Peter, it's not even a week since we've had well, what do you call it? You don't call it an invasion. You call it the strikes, I suppose, by Israel and the United States.
When you put boots on the ground, you call it an invasion. If you just fly over, yeah, it's a strike, for lack of a better definition.
Strikes are hectic. For one day, the market thinks, it's not going to last long, and picks up its head. Next day, the market says, not so happy about this. This could continue for a long time. And then you need a Donald Trump coming out to say something positive, and then the market goes up against. The turbulence is just quite extraordinary.
Yeah, and this is a guy who is used to having immediate reactions. And so when he sees that he says something and the market reacts immediately, that's just giving more chocolate bars and cookies to the bear. Then it just wants more and more. And so the market seems to have adjusted to Donald Trump. They seem to like each other, Alec. Whether it's interest rates or whether it's equity valuations or whether it's foreign relations, everybody seems to jump and react accordingly to how Donald wants them to, on the whole.
Yeah, and as far as the metals markets are concerned, clearly gold has benefited a great deal by the uncertainty.
Alec, they say that's why gold's gone up, but I don't think so, because gold has now been over 5,000 for what? 4 months, 5 months. And yes, it hit 56 and then it pulled back quite quick, but it keeps going to 52, 53. Gold has really found a stable level. I was surprised that it fell so hard yesterday. It really fell hard. Um, all the metals did, but for gold to fall, what, 4.5%? And yet look how quick it got it back. And silver too. Silver will fall below 85, but it's back up there in hours, not even days. So these metals, I think they've gone up for a lot more reasons, and it is becoming a war. It's not having an effect on them other than oil. Boy, and you were talking about when we thought gold was so pricey. Would you buy it, Pete? About a month ago when it was 53, 54, I said, no way. It's too far out of bounds from its norm and from its relativity to everything else. You said, well, relative to what? And I said, well, bonds, cash. And you said oil. I said, oh yeah, geez, it's only been this far out of whack with oil once. And I can find you 5 times when it looked too valuable compared to oil, and it never stayed there literally weeks. And boy, we've seen it. Oil's now gone from 60 to 80, and gold's the same price it's been for months. So that was a great relative play. Long Sasol and short was some of the gold.
Oh, I hope that many of the tribe actually followed that play. But as things stand right now, the most sense that I've seen, and it could be completely wrong because who knows, but it was in a piece that was in the Financial Times this week, which we republished on Biz News, which said that the Ayatollah had prepared very well for the response because he was well aware that this was coming. He was also well aware that they were going to hit his compound, and so he was quite happy to be martyred. But the way that they prepared was to attack the oil, well, to ensure that the oil market were to be given such a jolt that the oil price would go up, and then also to attack equity markets around the world in the way that they could by, well, inter alia, sending missiles into the Gulf states. So that was one part of the theory. The other part of the theory, and this was given to the Financial Times by somebody who's in the Iranian regime, so with the close to the Ayatollah. The other part of the theory is that the instructions, the orders, have gone down to cells. So it's not the fact that you've taken out a whole lot of the senior people in the defense force or the army or the Republican Guard is irrelevant because the instructions from the Ayatollah, who's now been martyred, went a long way down, and it's impossible to actually turn that around. And the thesis then is that this is not going to be a short war. It's going to continue for quite some time. And I'd love to get your take on that.
Boy, I've got two real big takes on this, Alec. Even if I just woke up and I didn't have any background knowledge at all, I would say it's pretty evident these guys were preparing with offensive weapons. It's kind of like when Hitler went into Russia and they supposedly caught Russia totally surprised and they made really good advances. There's a very historical meeting, and they've even been able to put the voices by reading their lips of Hitler going to Finland and in a train car talking to Mannerheim. Mannerheim was head of Finland then, and he had led the troops against the Soviets a few years. And Hitler was saying, if you knew what we found when we went into Russia, my gosh, we had no idea. They were they had so much equipment, so many planes, tanks. They were preparing for an offensive. Well, that's how I felt. I was really guilty of thinking this thing's going to be over in a day. You got the whole Israeli Air Force and half the American Air Force coming at them from all sides, and yet these missiles and these drones just keep coming out. And so it shows these guys, they didn't just put this together in a couple of weeks or a couple of months. They've been planning for years. If someone tampers with them, this is the kind of retribution that's going to follow. So I think that's exceeded everybody's estimation. I don't even think Israel thought they had this much in store. The second part, though, will these cells keep operating? We know that I want to say Irish Republican Guard, um, the Iranian Republican Guard. They are a bit radical, but they've been calling all the shots. They have the most to lose. The average person there, I feel so sorry for, doesn't have as much to lose as them. They've been living high on the hog. They've controlled the budget. They've controlled where the money gets spent. And just look at how much money was spent on offensive military gear. You know, it could have been building that country, and yet everybody knows their main objective is the destruction of Israel. Whether Israel is good or bad, right or wrong, to base a whole country's focus saying that is our sole purpose in life. That is our main purpose in life, not to grow economically, increase the wealth and care and well-being of our population. It's the utter destruction of Israel. Boy, we're seeing that's what they've been spending money, time, and effort on for decades. And they were even hinting we've already got enough uranium for 11 atomic bombs. Well, that's all you had to say to have the states in Israel say enough's enough.
And from the US and Israel's perspective, how much patience have they got to see this through?
I think both are very reluctant to put boots on the ground. And I think both are a bit naive, thinking there's this second large party that's just going to rise up and take things over. We always wish that, but would that happen in Zimbabwe? Has it happened in Venezuela? It's too entrenched. The people that benefited from the last 40 years, there's a lot of them. It's like saying, what happens if Helen Zille takes over Johannesburg, or heaven forbid, she's elected president in the next election? We're not going to see that quick a big difference because there's 1.2 million, what do you want to call them, government employees that probably have allegiance, if not directly to the ANC, to the ANC's principles. So it's going to take a long time in Iran to put together a stable government. And yeah, they'd probably be fighting these radicals. What is there, 15, 20,000 of them, that control the economy, that control all that budget. Somewhere, someone's probably going to have to put boots on the ground. But I just can't believe the number of missiles and drones they just keep sending out in all directions. And boy, a lot of it's pinpoint accuracy. These guys were masters.
Well, Iraj Abedian has given us some insights into how much the Republican Guard have to lose because his estimation, and remember, he is from Iran. He grew up there, only came to South Africa when he was 20, and he has many family and friends there. He says that only 10 to 15% of the population support the regime, the mullahs, and that the mullahs have taken something like 500,000 people. Well, there are 500,000 families, according to Iraj, who have lost at least one person who's disappeared. Are they dead? Are they incarcerated? Who knows? Now you extrapolate that and the consequences of that once the mass graves, etc., start showing up for those who were part of the regime are existential. They're going to get the bullets in the head themselves rather than putting it into others. And I guess that gives you a very powerful motivation to fight on.
Yeah, yeah, it is. But I don't know how long they can last. It's terminal. Whatever they're doing is terminal because there's 90 million people living there. And I think we're all sure somewhere between 50% and at least 80% are totally against the regime. And so even if that regime controls the levers, they have no army, no air force, no navy, and eventually they're going to have no police or security forces. The West, the Arab countries, maybe together, some kind of UN peacekeeping force. They're going to eventually have to get boots on the ground to allow the locals to reassert themselves. Because otherwise, who's got all the guns? Who's got all the detention centers? But I think it's coming. I think we're past the point. To me, they're just going to piss off more and more people by continuing this. And they're going to inflame more people that probably would have let things slide that are going to track them down. Like you said, Alec, if there's 500,000 people disappeared in the last 20 years because of these, you can bet families are not going to let that go. Families will dedicate the rest of their life to tracking down who's responsible.
So, what does all of this mean? And the way you've outlined it, it does appear as though it's certainly not going to end anytime soon. What does this mean for what South Africa's interest should be here, which is our minerals?
Iran's got a lot of minerals, according to mining engineers and geologists I know, but they've been tied up for 40 years. And so, whether if they just disappeared off the map or if they became very productive tomorrow, they can't start producing enough minerals to make a difference in world commodity markets for some time. As far as South Africa goes, I'm not sure what we got out of this Iranian relationship, Alec. You know, there's definitely missing parts here that I don't have a clue that we so fervently were backing them and pretending we were friends. Maybe we really were. I just didn't think the ANC had a lot in common with them. Anyways, it it hasn't benefited us that I can see at all. In fact, it's probably taken a lot more away from what this country could have gotten from the rest of the world by pretending we were so close or going through the motions or trying to be so close to them. Yeah, metals markets. Look, oil will come down once these missiles and these drones drop dramatically in number. And hey, that's got to be finite. If you keep blowing up the the production facilities, they can't keep just churning them out. The oil price will recover. Oil is high because these missiles and drones, they can take out massive oil refineries like you're seeing the Ukrainians doing with Russia. And it doesn't take much, huh? Half a dozen $50,000 drones dropped in the middle of a big Saudi, million barrel a day refinery, 5 million barrel a day. Geez. So I think when they decimate anything that can fly, oil will start recovering because then ships can go unhindered and people will operate plants. But all they can do is really anger the rest of the world and keep oil prices high for another few weeks. But there's no shortage of oil in the world. And if anything, a free Iran, the whole world will help them and allow them to produce to their capacity, 2, 3, 4 million barrels a day. Instead, they've been producing 2 million barrels a day, and they had to do it like Russia, surreptitiously, and probably sell at 30, 40% discounts. So the sooner we get stability there, the sooner the whole world will help them get their production probably higher than it's been in 20 years. So oil prices will definitely come down. This is short term.
You said right at the outset that the war is not necessarily the only reason why the gold price is remaining strong. What did you mean by that?
Exactly. I I think we've covered some of the reasons before, Alec. People are unsure of other currencies. The dollar's gone from what? At the start of last year, the dollar hit 102, 103, and at the end of last year, it was 118. So the dollar lost 15, 16%. Well, that definitely benefits gold. But when you see all these central banks buying, and when you see big central banks buying, like Russia and China and some of the European banks, those are serious countries stocking central banks. And then when you see there's 1.4 billion Chinese that have spending power now, China didn't even exist in 1980 as we know it now. So it's massive speculative, or call it investor buying. That's what's driving the gold price. It's buying from all ends. And now pension funds and now ETFs, they've got inflows, and the people say, "Oh, put a little gold in me." So, an ETF has to buy on that day at that price. When the money comes in, they got to buy that day. So I think this war, it's kind of been brewing for 20 years off and on. I don't I think it caused some short-term movements, but it hasn't sent gold to 5,600. It actually sent it down, but it's just rebounded to where it was 2 days ago. Yeah, I don't think the war has too much to do with the current gold price.
We've spoken a lot about copper in the Miningweb Weekly show over the last few months. Has there been much of an impact there?
No, even less, Alec. I'm glad you brought up copper because I know everybody is talking about copper as much as they're talking about gold. But copper has not done what gold's done. Copper's had a really good year. I think it's up 15%. But I even did a graph here of copper. I think it's worth knowing. Copper was selling at 450 12 years ago. It was selling at $4.50 7 years ago. So now it's selling at 525. Well, if 12 years ago it was selling at 450 a pound and today it's selling at 520, that's about 12% in 12 years, kind of a 1% a year increase. So, yes, everybody's talking about copper, but its price hasn't gone berserk. Yes, it's out of its standard deviation. I say one standard deviation out of the mean. It is out of it, but only by a little bit. It's not been half as exciting as gold. Gold's literally up 50% in barely over a year. Silver, it's up 200% in over a year. Copper's up 15%. So, and yeah, I don't think it came off 2% the last 2 days, and it's almost back to where it was today.
And more important from a South African perspective is PGMs or platinum group metals. How have they been doing in reaction?
They got hit harder than anybody yesterday. I thought, about time, this is crazy. Like the platinum price, it looked like a guy who's 1 inch from the grave on a hospital bed. For 10 or 12 years, you couldn't hardly see the platinum price move. It'd go to 1,050 or it'd go down to 950. I don't think there's any commodity other than lead that did less than platinum. Then last year, about the middle of the year, it breaks out of that 1,000 and it goes to 1,200. I go, yeah, it's going to come back. Then it goes to 15. Now it's definitely coming back now. 2,000. Oh my gosh. It's it's pushing 2,300. So, and rhodium is back to 12,000, 12,500. Its long-term average, I think, is about 45. So these PGMs, yeah, they had a big reaction yesterday. They were off 9%, I think, and they got most of it back today. It's it's amazing. And to put it in perspective, I calculate the average dollar per ton that comes from our underground platinum mines. And it had fallen early last year. It was down to about $150 a ton, which is below its long-term average. And it's now 350 a ton. And it's been 350 a ton now for a few months. Well, that's why these platinum shares have gone crazy. You had to adjust when you're averaging $150 a ton. Now you're averaging 350 a ton. My gosh, you know why Paul Dunn and everybody's smiling like a Cheshire cat. And put it in perspective, 350 a ton is great, but during COVID, in today's terms, it was 600 a ton. It's, if you remember, our platinum mines, we thought people were going to go to jail in 2019, 2020. They had tens of billions of debt, all of them. Well, Sibanye the most. and yet it wasn't 12 months of those kind of prices. Everybody had a clean balance sheet. In less than another 12 months, they virtually had as much cash as they'd had debt. Um, boy, that's why shares go up multiples when you get big moves in the commodity.
So, what do we need to look for now going forward?
I'm back to being scared. Yesterday, I put an order for Afrimat. You know, I told you I'm positive on Afrimat. Not bullish, but I'm positive on it. Whenever it was below 40, I've been trying to buy a few. And it'd get it to 42, 43. I said, oh, it went too far. Then bang, it falls down to 38. Yesterday, people were giving it away at 33.50. I just didn't have enough money to get much. And I see it's up 8, 9% today. So this is a stock picker's market. I know that sounds corny. We hear it too often, but certainly on the commodity side, in my view, this is a stock picker's market. You can't blindly go out and just buy these things because most of them are discounting way, way too much.
And the stocks to be picking, you've mentioned Afrimat. What about Orion? That's another one, although it still has done very well this year.
It has done well. I'm not sure why it's pulled back. I think there's two reasons it's pulled back, Alec. One is this is an Australian company. The Australians know it inside and out. That's where most of the trade is going. That's where the big decisions are made. That's where most of the money has been raised. So they know this company inside and out, and they've had a lot of rights issues the last few years. And the last 12 months in particular, they had rights issues at ridiculous levels, 12 and 17 cents. So this is like Medarex when Rob Still took it over. You know, Rob's trademark was, I'm taking something over. First thing I got to do is raise money. And he'd punish existing shareholders if they didn't have cash. He'd put a rights issue about 50% below the price. I remember Nedbank did that when they had a rights issue in the financial. You put it down so low that anybody going in is going to make a ton of money. It's just the poor guys that can't follow. So those, I believe the inside shareholders were getting out of a lot of that because that was short-term borrowings. They loaded their boots, and it went from 13 cents to 19 real quick. And a couple months later, it went from 19 to 30 to 40 to 45. So call that profit taking. And the second thing is, it looks like they've completed the negotiations with Glencore to come in, but they've admitted there's still going to be an equity raise that existing shareholders are going to have to contribute. Now, I know they've been trying to find a way to finance this where shareholders didn't have to put in any more. But by them announcing that, shareholders are saying, all right, if we're going to have to contribute, you guys have a history of making the new shares a lot lower than the current price in order to get a good following. So I think people are backing off. They're going to wait and see what this rights issue's at. Um, it was 45 trading a couple of weeks ago, so maybe the rights issue's at 37, 35. But I think that's put a damper on the price until there's more clarity. How much are they going to raise, and what price do they aim to raise it at?
So, as a stock picker, and that's what we're looking at now, would you be looking at Anglo American given the deal that's been done with Teck and turning them into such a powerhouse in the copper industry?
No, and I was thinking about that today because brokers, analysts are talking about Anglo's re-rating, but I think it's re-rated enough. I think if they figure there's more re-rating coming, they're being overly optimistic. Anglos and Billiton, especially Anglos. Anglos did well most of last year compared to where it was. It was leading Billiton. Billiton's done a fast catch up, but when I see a figure that says Anglos is now 80% copper, and I see copper at 13,000 a ton, and I see stocks are building up all over the world now. You know, China has excess smelter capacity. They're smelting virtually for free. Just give them your concentrate, and maybe they get a few of the byproducts, or they pay you only 80, 90%. But there's a big buildup, not just in LME warehouses, all over. And so I just think 13,000 is too high. Everybody's making tons of money. And the first rule I've learned in business is everybody is not allowed to make a lot of money all the time. There's something wrong. And
Other
yeah,
people are
so
going to
I
come into it.
yeah, so I think Anglo's it it's not rich, but no, I'm a guy who waits for pullbacks, darn it. I'll find something else to invest in. But yeah, whether it's maybe some more Jubilee, maybe I'll nibble some Orion here. I won't buy as much as I could until I see what the rights issue is. But yeah, I'm into buying mines that have not discounted this huge price increase. And Anglo's, I think, is discounted. It was a great merger. It was done well. I think it's a good fit. The market's rewarded it. If 80% of that company is copper and copper is 13,000 plus, and their stock's building up rapidly now, I think that's as good as we're going to see it. I think you're risky now buying it and thinking you're going to make another 10 or 15% this year.
Well, there's the inside track from Peter Major. He will be at the Biz News conference next week. Look forward to that. Look forward to seeing you there, Pete. And I'm Alec Hogg from biznews.com.